Welcome everyone to yet another episode of Roaring Fork Leadership's Resiliency Experience, brought to you, of course, by Roaring Fork Leadership and partnership of CoVenture. Really fortunate today to have Erin Clark with us. Some of our theme this month has been around DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion in different aspects. And of course, trying to relate to those things that go on in our community as well as statewide and nationwide. I even saw an email in a lot of these training forums, that DEI is just such a hot topic. Really appreciate some of our direction in our country that's paying attention to it. And there's a focus on it, which I think there's been focuses over the years. It's kind of ebbed and flow, and I'm looking forward to seeing where, with the emphasis on it, where these types of inequalities might start becoming more equitable, of course, along the way, and just how we relate from a diversification and of course, inclusivity. So Erin is out of Boulder. I've found him obviously through Brian Ward, Roaring Fork Leadership's board president, who had seen a video of him on YouTube talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and was inspired and shared his information with me to reach out. So I feel extremely fortunate to have connected with him and his willingness to lead a conversation on something I know he's absolutely passionate about, and that is with this Justice Reskill initiative that he has within his nonprofit called Equity Solutions. And he is the founder and CEO of that. And today, of course, the topic we're going to be talking about is racial and economic inequality in the American criminal justice system. And Erin, eventually I'm going to connect you up with another friend of mine. He's a professor, Dr. Stephen Hartnett, who works with incarcerated individuals to help them obviously succeed and reform and move through that system, the criminal justice system. So I think the two of you have a lot to talk about, and we'll save that for another email. But again, welcome, Erin, and really look forward to the discussion and insights that you can bring to us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, everyone, for making some time to attend. Before I get started, can you do me a favor? If you have experience working with the justice system in any way, just raise your hand real quick, just so I kind of know who I'm talking with. Okay, perfect. All right, so we've got a little bit, probably half and half. And I do see Rebecca and Megan on as well. I know both of them. They're on my team. So I'm going to try and share my screen, and then see if this will work. It doesn't. Hold on, it's not. There we go. All right, can everybody see my screen okay?
Sure can.
Awesome, perfect. I'm going to just move my stuff around here a little bit. Well, let me get started and jump in here. So we get this advanced. There we go. I will tell you a little bit about my background and history, typical bio stuff, and then I'll get into what I think is something a little more interesting. As Andrew said, I'm the CEO of a consulting firm called Equity Solutions. But today I'm focusing on Justice Reskill, which is a brand within my firm that is focused on providing pathways for career for those that are in justice involved. But I'd like to back up and tell a little bit more about my story, just so that you understand kind of how I got here. When I was very, very young as a child, I always remembered people asking me what I want to be when I grew up. And I never really had an answer in terms of a specific career. It went everywhere from a firefighter to a Marine. My dad was in the Air Force, to a Marine, to a surgeon, to a veterinarian. Like, I just wanted to do things, and I realized what I really wanted to do was to actually help people. So through a lot of experiences, good, bad, indifferent, I have landed in a particular area in my life now that I'm very fortunate to be in. I see it as a lot of preparation, a lot of curiosity, very diverse interests. Something a lot of people don't know about me is I actually went all the way to seminary, and I dropped out in seminary and changed my life. Plenty of heartaches, a lot of life learnings. And then the timing of what 2020 was, which is very, very important. In 2020, we saw a lot of really amazing and interesting things happen. And then we also saw a lot of very negative things happen to our country. The racial reckoning that we saw, COVID, the pandemic that we're still dealing with today, a lot of the political unrest, is a very unique time that a lot of folks have taken advantage of, for better or for worse. And then a lot of connections have got me to where I'm at right now. I put a few of the names there on the screen because I recently moved to Colorado. I was in the Bay Area before. And a number of folks that I met when I started coming to Colorado over 2 years ago have been very instrumental in getting myself and this work that I'm doing at the forefront. And I wouldn't be here without those folks. That has led to me being able to provide impact for people. I like to tell people that my work is at the intersection of tech, equity, and criminal justice reform. That is where I love to exist. That is where I do best. Now, moving over to talking more about the criminal justice system, if you work with anyone that dabbles or gets involved in reentry or helping folks that are currently incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, if you spend any amount of time with them, what you'll find is that each person has a why, a core reason as to why they're doing the work they're doing and what matters most to them. I'm going to see if this will work, but I'm going to play a video to you which encapsulates the exact reason why I'm involved in this work. Some of you may have seen the story. It's the story of Rayshard Brooks, who was killed in Georgia last year, sitting in a Wendy's parking lot. I want to play his story. It's about 3 minutes long, so that you kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Okay, well, I'm Rayshard Brooks, 27 years of age. I have 3 kids. You know, I'm happily married. I want, you know, things to be bettered, you know, within probation and parole, and also monitoring. If you do some things that's wrong, you pay your debts to society, and that's the bottom line. And, you know, I just feel like some of the system could, you know, look at us as individuals. We do have lives, you know, it's just a mistake we made, you know, and not just do us as if we are animals. It's making us as individuals feel like we're locked in boxes. Even though we have been incarcerated, it's hurting us, but it's hurting our family the most. You know, because we have kids, we have jobs, we have a lot of things that, you know, life situations. We are individual people. So as we go through these trials and tribulations, it's hurting our kids, and it's taking away from our families. You have to try and go out, you know, make means, you know, and yet my kids, you know, I want to spend some time with my kids, but I really don't have the time. You know, I have to try and go out, you know, make money for this, make money for bills, or try and get myself back on track. It's just a lot of pressure, you know, with, you know, just having all of that on your shoulder and on your back. You know, it's just a lot of pressure. And some people, they just can't deal with it. You know, it's restricting us. They're telling us, hey, you have a curfew, and, you know, certain things, you have to be in a house, you know, just restricting us from the everyday life. It's just hard for us, you know, at times, because we're trying to do the right thing and we're restricted. Probation is not there with you every day, like a mentor or something. They're not taking you out to find a job. I feel like it should be a way for you to have some kind of person like a mentor assigned to you to, you know, keep your track, keep you in the direction you need to be going. But here yet, I'm trying. You know, I'm not the type of person to give up, you know, and I'm going to keep going until I make it to where I want to be.
So Rayshard Brooks, that video was recorded in February of 2020, and he was killed on June 12th, 2020. It was a professionally recorded video by an organization called Reform that Jay-Z and Meek Mill and a bunch of other celebrities are involved with. And they recorded that because his story is like a lot of people that have gone through the criminal justice system and found themselves in parole or probation. And I've watched that video probably 100 times. And every time I watch it, I keep hearing the same thing, which is a man that was just looking for an opportunity to take care of his wife and 3 kids. I have 3 kids. I think about my kids every single day. And I think about how all I care about is making sure that they're okay and that they have a better life than I have. And Rashard Brooks was saying the same thing. So we're going to come back to parole, probation, and some of those effects in a second. But I want to talk about what goes into and how we got to where we are with our criminal justice system. Part of the conversation, or the beginning of the conversation I like to have around justice, is what is equity? Again, any person that you work with in the justice system will tell you what's the most important thing to them, whether it be if someone does something wrong, they should have to pay for it, et cetera. But for me, everything begins and ends with equity. And in my opinion, equity is an important conversation, important topic to make sure that people understand. And the way that people normally describe the equity, not the money or the financial side of equity, but equity in terms of the quality of making sure that things are fair, unbiased, and just. So when you think of diversity, equity, inclusion, you hear this word thrown around a lot, but it's really trying to say, what are we doing to make sure that things are fair? But it's important to dive a little bit deeper into that and understand that what we're saying when we say equity is we want to make sure that everyone around us has access to the resources, to opportunities, power, and responsibilities that they need. Again, that word "they" is really important. Not what I need, but what they need to reach their full healthy potential, as well as making systemic changes so these differences are balanced out. Now, what I need is very different than what you might need, right? My upbringing, my situation, where I'm at in my life is very different. So it's very important to understand that in order for us to do something like fix a justice system or to fix inequality, we have to understand the plight or the position of the person involved so that we fix it in a way that makes sense for them and not necessarily us.
Aaron, I've always, there's a organization in our valley, the Manaus, and they're, building a social justice center. I don't know if they're naming it that or whatnot, but the idea behind it, of course, is to, tackle these issues, of course, here locally in our community. But I think when I made a comment when I had a kind of a interview tour that they were doing was, I feel like whenever you get in a room and you start talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, is like you have to come up with a shared definition of it. Because I think what you just commented on, everybody has a different perspective of what it might mean based on how I have experienced any of 3 of those, under the category, right? So we have our own perception of what it might mean. But then when you get in a group think, I think that's important. Would you agree that needs to be kind of a foundation of conversation, something to start on when you're talking about these things?
I agree. Most of the training that our consultants and myself do around diversity, equity, inclusion begins with an understanding of definition of the words and how we're using them first. For that, we actually extrapolate and take away our personal perspective, and we look to a shared understanding that, in this sense, experts believe. And that's why I put the link on the bottom. The Stanford Social Innovation Review is the one that drafted this particular language. And it's the one that I use all the time because it captures everything. Now, how we integrate it and implement it, yes, does change. But when we're talking diversity in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, this is the most well understood and well accepted definition of the word. How we do it might be different in Boulder than in Aspen or in Berkeley, California. Those things might change, but the definition is something, you're right. We should all get on the same page and understand when we say diversity, what are we meaning? We're meaning difference of opinion, difference of skin color, difference of background, and that's fantastic. But I always talk about equity as the North Star and racial equity as the focus of my work, and I'll explain why in a minute. But yes, it's very important to get to those core definitions of what it is. Moving on in the same vein, when you look at racial equity adds another component, and it's trying to take justice, add some common sense, and look at the systems that are kind of out of balance for people of color. the Center for Social Inclusion, and I'm going to give you the link to this exact article that talks about this, because I want to say, I'm not going to say anything new today. I'm not going to bring any brand new, amazing thoughts, TED Talk, none of that. All of this is commonly held knowledge around these topics, but it's important that we go back to our history, back to understanding for racial equity, the criminal justice system, our roots, how we got here, so that we don't repeat it. And you'll see in the end, we're kind of about to go through some things that look a little bit like 1865 if we don't pay attention. So going back to racial equity, it's looking at the systems that we've got in place and how people of color have been impacted by these systems of imbalance or these systems of oppression. Glenn Harris is the president of CSI, and they've done a great job of explaining how it looks different. They talk about it as both an outcome, so something that we want to have, racial equity in our world, but really also a process. You'll also hear it called a journey. So racial equity is something that we're on our way to, but we understand when we see it, we know what it'll look like. As an outcome on the first part, is when race actually is no longer a factor, right? You'll hear people talk about that a lot. You'll hear them talk about when race doesn't, tell whether you're going to be incarcerated or not, whether or not you're poor or rich, whether or not you have opportunities or not. Race is not a part of that question. Now, we also know as a process, we actually do have to apply race so that inequity is eradicated. For instance, if we don't have laws around making sure that we have enough representation in certain things like voting, like colleges, like funding, and support and those sort of things, we will have racial inequality. So racial equity is the process that we're utilizing to get to that final outcome where it actually doesn't matter. So sometimes you'll hear people talking about both of those things at the same time, and it's important to kind of distill what they're referring to. Now, a lot of people, when we talk about race, some people will say, why does it even matter? Why does it matter to tackle race? Why don't we tackle something else? Now, this is my soapbox. This is my opinion I'm going to insert. I have an outsider, now an insider opinion about the state of Colorado. When I was looking from outside in, I could see it. Now I'm a part of it, so I kind of have to be a little careful. Here in Colorado, I think Colorado did something very well. I think Colorado focused on a form of gender equality, but not necessarily gender equity. Gender equity would be that everyone has what they need to succeed. So we'd have more women in power. We'd have more women as CEOs, more women as venture capitalists, more women at board chair. What we have is a modicum of gender equity in the state. And so we still have pay inequity. We still have problems with women not receiving as much influence as needed. The reason we start with race, and a lot of this conversation around racial equity comes from the government on race and equality, which I'll post this link later, is that some marginalization categories of race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, age, nationalities, when you focus on some of these categories instead of focusing on race, you tend to have a disjointed methodology for trying to tackle equity. You might have, sexual orientation equity in some sense, but it'll flip because race, when it's not addressed, can keep these marginalized communities from coming together. So we try to take race, create a framework, tools, resources for tackling equity so that we can then apply it to other categories. And then the last point, which is possibly the most poignant point of why we tackle race first a lot, is simply slavery. Slavery is the longest standing system of oppression that we have in America. And by system of oppression, I mean institutionalized, on purpose system to harm another group of people or a group of people. So if you look at gender, sexual orientation, ability, age, nationality, etc., they also have been oppressed, but not as systemically hard and as long as we have to slavery in our country. So it's almost like this is a root cause that we've got to go back to and address tackling that specifically. Now, if we look at our criminal justice system, we first have to look at the roots. You all have heard that saying that says, if you don't understand your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, this also plays out here. A lot of times we'll look at, say, 2020, 2021 at our criminal justice system, and we'll fail to remember kind of how we got here. So if you were to do your own history research, and I'm going to send you a link that it's literally history.com, and we'll spell all of this out for you. You can kind of read and dive into it. It's actually pretty fascinating to look and see how we got here. But way back in the colonial days, when our country was first founded, you'll see a lot of our criminal justice system with roots of England, France, even the Dutch Republic. A lot of their criminal justice stuff kind of started bleeding over, because when the founding fathers came here to escape England, if you look closely, they didn't bring a lot of legal criminal justice experts. They didn't bring lawyers, et cetera. They just brought people that wanted to get away from England and come to this new land, and they came, and then they just tried to start figuring things out. And so they pulled things from other systems that they were used to. And then, as we know, what kind of percolated from the top of that is the English common law. You know, a separate talk could dive into, you know, the systems of judges and magistrates and county sheriffs and all the colonial courts that we had in the early founding of our country. But out of that, they determined that the common law, or the English common law, was the most important thing. So as that was all founded, if you fast forward to around 1862, 1863, that is when kind of our current criminal justice system started getting its roots. Abraham Lincoln proposed the Emancipation Proclamation. He said, let's give Black folks some of their freedoms back. There's a fight between the Confederate. If you'll look closely, it really wasn't abolishing slavery. It was just abolishing and letting some of the slaves go free that were being held by the northern or the boundary states. But the Confederate states didn't like it. So if you'll remember, if you look at your history, you know, right as he said that, and in 1865, he was killed a few days later for basically saying Black folks should have their rights. Right after the Emancipation Proclamation, we have something called the Black Codes. If you've not looked up the Black Codes, please take some time to research that. Mississippi and South Carolina were the first two states to enact the Black Codes, which were basically a rebuttal against the Emancipation Proclamation. These were just insane laws that basically said that Black people, African Americans, they could only have certain kinds of jobs, like as a farmer or a servant. And if you had another kind of job, you had to pay a tax or an annual tax to the government. And if you didn't do certain things and sign certain contracts, they could throw you in jail, and you'd be required to do hard labor, which is where our prison system got started with those black codes. And you know your history. 14th Amendment tried to push back on this, and then all the Jim Crow laws were set into place. But it's really important to understand that that was the fight that was happening in 1865 was around slavery. It was around race. It was around ideological. And it's ironically where, if you'll watch some of the news and some of the interviews you're seeing, people are talking about this exact thing, trying to go back to fighting against what they think are rights of people that they don't like.
Well, even if you, Aaron, just a thought in my, I'm in my graduate class, and I did one of my projects was on like social inequality around social justice issues. I took the wealth gap, right? Just, and it was interesting to research that and go back to understanding, even from my perspective, more of what this white supremacy, digging into it, and then understanding that even like laws and policies, when slavery was abolished, there was still limitations. Like if they went to a bank and tried to get a loan, you know, even though they had the job and everything, even they could even look better than, let's say, a white person on paper that the bank should have no problem giving them a loan. There'd be some little, like, you know, small type asterisk exception that would not allow them to get the loan. I mean, it was just, when I read it, I hate to say it, I got sick to my stomach. I was just like, what is this about all men created equal? And then all this stuff is going on, you know, it's just, so anyway, just a comment to, it's interesting as you research any topics on this and get deeper into it, you really start to see where, in my opinion, some of that inequality started, right?
100%. And even the laws that pass some of these codes, you know, no one Black could actually vote on them, which is why when we talk about any sort of justice reform or any sort of thing around the criminal justice system, we make sure to point out that it's important to have people that have lived experience, that understand, make decisions around this topic. Because if we rewind back to 1862 and these things are being discussed, of course, white landowners are going to make decisions and vote in a way that serve their interest without respect to the impact to other folks. And so these laws do have, crazy things like forced labor and require you to pay certain taxes, and you couldn't own land, or you couldn't marry someone that was outside your race, and all these sort of things because of that exact thing. Now, that's the history of where we're at. Again, we could spend all day long talking about all the different factors that led up to 2020 and where we're at in terms of mass incarceration. We could talk about the civil rights movement. We could talk about the war on drugs. We could talk about all these things that have got us to this point, but I want to save that for another talk. And I'm going to show you about 4 graphs that unfortunately I can't say them any better. I can't produce this information in any other way than you just seeing those. And so I'm going to send you this. Everybody on my team has to read this report. Everybody that I work with has to read this entire report, because it is the most sobering picture of where our criminal justice system is today. And the article is actually called The Whole Pie 2020. So every year the Prison Policy Initiative updates this, and they show a bunch of statistics. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to call out a few of those in each one of these slides to show you where our justice system's at and how it's affecting Black and brown people more than anyone else. As you can see on here, we have over 2.3 million people that are currently confined in our country, 2.3. We've got 1.3 of those million inside state prisons. So that's like Department of Corrections, et cetera. Then we've got about 631,000 that are local jails. That's like Boulder County, that's Denver jail, that sort of things. And then we've got 226,000 in federal prisons and jails. Those are the big ones that you hear about on like TV shows, et cetera. When someone does, tax fraud or, cross a state line, those are the federal, but it's actually not the biggest. The biggest are state prisons. And you can see about 700,000 of those are for violent crimes. We have other ones for small things like property and drug crimes that are in our prisons as well. Overwhelmingly, white Americans are underrepresented in the incarcerated population, while Black folks are overrepresented. So if you look on the left-hand side of that graph, you can see the population. And while 64% of our population presents as white, only 39% of folks that are incarcerated are white. But same thing, on the left-hand side, we have 13% Black folks in America, but 40% Black folks in prison in America. So without question, our incarceration is a race problem. It's not a debatable statistic. It is clearly a race problem. Now we can debate on why it's there and how we got here, but we can clearly see that we do have more Black and Latino and Native Americans, according to our statistics, than any other race. Again, this one is really hard to see, but most people that are in our prison are poor. And most of those poor people are women and people of color. I don't know if you all remembered back when the Ferguson demonstrations happened, and that all kicked off, and then all the journalists went in and started doing research around Ferguson, Missouri, and they found, and I forgot the statistic, I should have looked it up, a staggering amount of people in the city of Ferguson, Missouri had a felony warrant either out or attached to them. And the amount of debt that they were saddled with was insurmountable. Most of the people in Ferguson, Missouri had debt, and they had a felony record for small things like traffic violations. But if you look at this chart here on the left-hand side, the annual income for a Black person not incarcerated is $31,000. That's across all folks, across all America. And then when incarceration hits you, it's down to $17,000. So no matter what state in life you're at, Black folks, women, people of color are hit more with the economic impacts of incarceration. 1 out of 5 people in the world is incarcerated in the US. Again, you can look at all of these countries across the world. We incarcerate more people than even China. Now, if you look at like human rights organizations, you think about human rights things, we automatically think China is harming their people, right? We think about China and these other countries doing really bad things to their people, Russia, et cetera. So we try to fight against them and have human rights violation campaigns, et cetera, war crimes, all of that, which we should be doing that. But we as Americans actually need to do a better job of putting the mirror up in front of us and saying, no, we actually are incarcerating more people than anybody else in the world. Here in the land of the free, the home of the brave, we are incarcerating people at a much faster clip than anybody else in the world.
Aaron, hi, this is Susan. Would you be able to go back 2 slides? I would like some clarification. So what you said here is that there's 2 ways I'm reading this. So for instance, the Black males, this $31,245, that is an annual salary or average salary across median annual pre-incarceration income. And then what this slide is saying is that after a Black male is incarcerated, his annual salary drops to $17,625. Is that, am I reading that correctly? Or no? Okay.
Thank you, Susan, for calling it. This one is a little bit confusing. This is an economic indicator of who goes to prison. So
Okay.
you have a Black man that is never incarcerated. His average income is $31,000.
Okay.
The Black man that ends up getting incarcerated for whatever reason, before he was incarcerated, his annual income is $17,000. So what they're making the comparison and saying is that poor people end up in prison for some reason. They're saying that if you're poor, you're Black, you're a person of color, or more so if you're a woman on the right-hand side, it's an early indicator of crime. We're trying to make a point of like, maybe there's something here in terms of lost opportunities, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
And then jumping ahead to the last one, we talk about mass incarceration, and this is very important to talk about people that are currently incarcerated. But this slide here talks about the plight of Rayshard Brooks. So other than just the 2.3 million people that are currently incarcerated in our country at any given time, we have over 7 million people that are under police supervision. That's either probation. Probation is normally assigned to you when you go to a local jail. So you've served less than 1 year in prison, you get a 3 or 5 year probation term, and you report to a probation officer and do different things. Parole is when you've been to a state prison and they let you out and say you're on parole for so many years and you've got to do all these sort of things. Correctional facilities, those are normally places like a work release program, that kind of thing. We have over 7 million people currently in our society walking around doing things that are in parole, probation, or some sort of correctional facility, in addition to 2.3 million that are currently incarcerated. And I didn't mention this statistic, but over 70 million Americans have either been formally or currently incarcerated. 70 million in our country, which makes sense if you take that 2.3 million and you capitalize, you do it more over and over and over every single year. So you all have heard a lot about criminal justice reform methods. So these are methods that people are trying to use to fix the problem that we just saw. You've heard about prison abolition, which is completely getting rid of all prisons, private and state. Decarceration, lowering the amount of people that are in prisons. There's a lot of DAs that are trying to reform and get less people inside of prisons. There's police reform, changing how we're doing with arrest laws, DA accountability. Tons of legislation out there talking about 3 strikes, mandatory minimum sentences, juvenile work, marijuana decriminalization, et cetera, et cetera. These are all reform methods. Every single one of these methods are trying to deal with the problems that we just talked about, the racial and the economic inequality in our country. We as Justice Reskill are focusing on a different path while helping and supporting all these other ones. We firmly believe that we need to have decarceration, less sentences, et cetera, et cetera. But what we have formed at Justice Reskill is a platform that we're trying to tackle the problem that Rayshard Brooks talked about in the beginning of the video. He was simply looking for an opportunity to provide resources for himself and his family to basically get himself back on track. He knew what had happened and transpired in his life, but he said, I just want a real opportunity where I'm not being harassed by probation or police, where I actually have a chance to make money and take care of myself. So what at Justice Reskill, we've built a platform that teaches technical skills and essential skills. Those are the ones that you used to call soft skills, to people that are just as involved, so that we can focus on economic justice and racial equity. We're attempting to help people get jobs in tech and tech adjacent fields so that they can actually save, pay fees and fines, buy a house, and then the holy grail, send their kids to college. Someone asked me once, what's your goal? And I said, my goal is to have hundreds and thousands of people just as involved that have said, because of my new life, I sent my kids to college. I just sent my daughter to college this last year, paid an arm and a leg for it. And she got a really great package. But I'm like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculously expensive. That's our goal, is to get our people to where they can do it. We do this by using an online platform. We also have a cohort model where we've got students that come together in community and learn from each other and learn with an instructor. We've got a cohort that started tonight I'm very happy about, with 20 plus students that are going to learn how to be front-end web developers and other technical skills. And then we built a apprentice program so that once they've learned these skills, they're able to apply that using real-world client experience. So they have that ability to say, I have done X, Y, Z, and it's live and in the wild, and you can go take a look at it. We couple this with a community aspect. Again, I want to say it's very important that people that have been through a certain type of lived experience have to work with people that understand where they come from. Because every day in their lives, they encounter certain things that if you don't know what it's like to be in their shoes, it's really hard to have empathy. So we couple people together with mentors and with support that can help them get through that. In 2021, we're going to do 20 cohorts of students that will learn technical and essential skills and then be placed with our hiring partners nationwide. And we're launching the first of its kind apprentice program for folks that are currently incarcerated at the Buena Vista prison. They'll leave each day and they'll go learn in our training facility, actually across the street from the prison. So they'll leave, get on a bicycle, drive over there, go meet with our instructors, they'll learn skills, and then at night they'll go back to the facility. And then once they're released, they'll have the skills ready and they'll be integrated into our programs so they can move forward with the rest of their training, the rest of their life. So that's a little bit about what we're doing with Justice Reskill. Again, I really want to point out that we are connected to and working with a number of other organizations across the state of Colorado and nationwide that are trying to help people find opportunities in justice reform so that they can get back on their feet and get to a place where they can provide for themselves, provide for their families, and become contributing members of society. Someone asked me the other day, like, again, like, what are you trying to get to? And I say voting is where I want our folks to be. I want our folks to understand that being a part of society has a lot of benefits. And some of these folks have been kept out of that because maybe of their circumstances, maybe where they were brought up, or maybe a decision they made that was a really stupid decision that they felt like they had no other choice to make. But our goal is to get as many people as possible. That number of launching 20 cohorts, it's insane. The amount of work that we're trying to tackle, it's a lot of work. But the reason is because the problem is huge. With over 70 million people in our country formerly incarcerated, we have to tackle this problem at scale. We have to tackle it in a way that we can get more, not less people to where you and I get to sit in life so that they can benefit from us. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions or comments about anything that I've covered or something that I maybe failed to bring up.
I'm curious when you talk about some of of course, the IT skills, all these skills that they can learn going through this program that you have. Are there leadership skills, like the idea of get involved in your community, that civic duty? Tell me more a little bit about those types of either mini trainings or conversations that you're having with them.
Yeah, we have a number of, we call them Reentry community partners across the state of Colorado. These are folks that have been doing this work for a long time. And a lot of Reentry organizations will partner together to provide these trainings. We have a gentleman on our, kind of on our Reentry team, Reentry partners, his name is Jonathan McMillan. He calls himself a success strategist. He served about 5 or 6 years in Colorado prison, and he's now a motivational speaker, a mentor, and he helps students at Metro State University come off of a life of justice into success. And one of the things that he does well is talk about that civic duty. Like, as a person that is now making good money, right? Because tech, our benchmark is kind of like $65,000 a year. Once we can get to someone to the point where they're making about 65K a year, that's where you're actually able to move forward in life. But once you get there, you do also have more responsibilities. You've got to get involved in your local community. You've got to get involved volunteering. You have to get involved voting. You have to understand, you have to educate yourself. You have to take care of your financial literacy. And so, yes, we do have those conversations via folks like Jonathan working with that program, but also our mentors, that we're working with do come in and talk about some of these things as well.
So are
Aaron,
you?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Evan.
Aaron, that was great. Thank you very much. I have a question here. I'm looking at the Justice Reskill website, and this little bullet point that says 50 to 63% are less likely to get a job application callback. After getting your tech training through this program, what are you doing to help applicants with not just the interview process, but landing jobs? What's the close ratio in terms of making sure that people are completing these, whether it's certification or training programs, and then ending up with actual paid positions?
Yeah, there is no close ratio metric yet, because no one's really tackled this in a holistic way and wanted to create a talent pipeline. So we realized with the whole person support, we've got to do a lot of things that might not be directly in our wheelhouse. And so what we did immediately was start the Fair Chance hiring platform. So I put the website there in conjunction with the Attorney General, Phil Weiser, Department of Corrections, Adult Probation and Parole, and a bunch of other agencies. We formed a kind of a coalition of a lot of the reentry partners in Colorado with the intent to recruit, train, and support small and medium businesses and some large businesses across the state of Colorado to become hiring partners. There are a number of hiring partners that we already have on board that want to hire people in Colorado left and right. Checker, FlockJ, a company called ERI Direct out of Aurora. They want to continue hiring more people that are formerly incarcerated. So what we are doing is basically building the network of employers to help them with some equity and cultural training and integration, but also keeping a community together of people so that as they run into different things, we can assist the people. We've got a couple lawyers on board that are helping with some of the employment law that a company would want to talk about a need in order to help people get hired as a fair chance hiring partner. The other thing I'll say is there are a lot of companies in Colorado that are already doing this. They just don't talk about it because no one has created any sort of need or any sort of desire to do this. And then the other thing that we're doing is we are reaching out to all of the Colorado legislators, all of the senators, to talk about incentives and things that we can build in for these small and medium businesses to hire people formerly incarcerated. There are a number of federal programs that provide assistance either through workforce training or federal bonding for formerly incarcerated hires, but we want to try and help the small businesses with some additional capital so that they can take on some training that they're going to need to continue doing this work.
I have a follow-up question, if it's okay.
Sure.
Have you been in touch with Dr. Shannon Block from Markle Foundation with Skillful.com?
She's on my board.
That's awesome. Okay. That says quite a lot. The other one was, are you in collaboration with Emily Griffith in Denver, or the Cherry Creek Innovation Campus, or Colorado Mountain College, or the Unreasonable Institute?
Emily Griffith is on my short list of folks I need to talk to about some apprentice stuff we're doing with the state.
Right.
Colorado Mountain College is leasing our building in Buena Vista. Dr. Wendy Wyman, she's the one that put together the package for us to lease the building there in Buena Vista.
But so is CMC going to be a partner in terms of your programming? Not
yet. We were talking with, I need to reach out to them. I forgot who I was talking with the other day about some of the CCCs, and CMC was on that list. So if you have a contact, I'd love to love to be connected to them.
Oh, I'm going to connect with you later anyway. Don't worry.
Okay.
Aaron, I have a question about the hiring, and if this is only for people in Colorado or organizations, businesses in Colorado, or if I can pass this on to a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that I used to be on out of a nonprofit in New Mexico, given that many things are on Zoom these days and remote work.
Yeah, you can definitely pass it to other folks. A couple things. One, we're launching our platform nationwide, and we'll kind of grow where we have connections of people that want to be interested. The next couple states that are pretty interesting are Arizona and New York, just because we've got some contacts there. My daughter's in college in New Mexico, so I would love to do a lot more work there and go eat some great green chili. So please do make that introduction.
Okay, great, thanks.
Love that. And then you're right, work being remote. I'll key you into two of the kind of little secret sauces that are making this work easy. The apprentice program that we're setting up is essentially a development shop. It's essentially a software shop with all the other services that go around it. And what happens a lot of times, if you're in tech, you've seen this, tech companies like to hire outside developers, freelancers, development shops to do this work. And the idea of selling that to companies is very attractive. I was on the call this morning with a development shop out of Minneapolis. And they're like, it would be really great to just be able to hire you and say, hey, go build this, give it to us, that final product. We'll give you some money. We love the idea of working with you. It's a win-win for everyone. And that way it gives the team that we're working with some experience. Again, I believe that is the missing link in getting folks jobs, is that experience. But no one's really taking a risk on that. And so that's why we're taking a risk on building out that apprentice program.
And kind of in that chain of how do we get people all the way into jobs, do you have any resources for recommendations for hiring practices? It's something that we have been struggling with and working with over the past 3 to 4 years, and any more information would be awesome for what can be done on the hiring side.
Yes, we are building a series of workshops to train employers for free, because again, people just need this information. We're building a ton of resources. There is an organization out of Portland run by a friend of mine, John Vive, called the Dave's Killer Bread Foundation. She's done a lot of work around it. Responsible Business Institute for Justice out of the UK has done a lot of work in this area. Televerde Foundation, they're all partners of ours. And so we are building kind of a Colorado specific workbook, should you call that. Checker has done a lot of work around fair chance hiring. They're now in Denver and helping us build some more resources. So the short answer is yes, we want to make it super simple for companies in Colorado to say, yes, we want to hire, here's what we do. And the other thing I want to point out that we didn't is a lot of times people are afraid, let's just call a spade a spade. They're afraid to hire someone formerly incarcerated because there's a myth in their head about who you're hiring, that it's a risk. We were on the call the other day with the department, workforce department, CDLA here in Colorado. There is a bond program that if you hire someone formerly incarcerated, has a felony, you can get a $25,000 bond for your company, for workplace, like embezzlement, or say something goes wrong on certain categories. And it's all you have to do is fill out one little half piece of paper and you get the insurance policy done. So I asked the lady, I said, hey, what's the process for putting in a claim, right? We all hate insurance claims. Like, what's that process like? It's the federal government. Are they gonna like make me jump through hoops? She's like, in 4 years I've been doing this, no one's ever had to put a claim in. She's like, and she's like, now that you mention that, the federal percentage is less than 1% in the entire US of people that have actually had to tap into this claim. The point there is when you hire someone formerly incarcerated, you're actually getting a loyal worker. Another thing we found out, sorry for rambling, the number one employer of people formerly incarcerated in the US is the US military. They hire people formerly incarcerated. They're doing it for a very specific reason, but there was a study that they participated in a few years ago that said that 30% of the people that are formerly incarcerated were more likely to be promoted up to a sergeant than people that weren't. So the people formerly incarcerated, we're doing better. And the reason is, to me, is very clear. It's loyalty. You give someone an opportunity that hasn't had it. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to work hard. They're going to show up. They're going to do what it takes because they're actually grateful. Whereas some of us other people like me in tech, I'm like, who cares? Move on to the next thing. So sorry for ranting, but.
No, that's perfect, because one of the things you touch upon there are what I would consider systemic hiring biases.
Yes.
And whether those systemic hiring biases are around names or history or gender or age or so many of these different things, it's just that's one of the things we're wrestling with. And we've been trying to figure out how to create, actually through software, a good way to remove those biases so that we're seeing people for what they're bringing to the table, as opposed to things that should not be in consideration for their opportunity in a role in a position.
Just put a link in the chat. A friend of mine, they're based in Denver. They've built a platform to help with bias in interviewing via
Nice.
software. So let me know if you want to reach out to them. They're also raising money right now. So
Awesome, thank you.
you're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions for Aaron?
I do. Minimize my chat box so I can see faces there. So my head is spinning with everything that you're doing, Aaron. I mean, it sounds like you're going at a supersonic rate in multiple directions. And from the logistics standpoint, from the strategic direction standpoint, it's more how are you prioritizing? How are you bringing in the resources? How are you allocating your resources? How are you not working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of thing to accomplish all of these objectives? So, just some insight into how you're managing the business of helping and serving others.
That's a great question. The only thing, I do work a little more than I probably should. I have an amazing team, hands down, like absolute hands down. My team is full of people that take this much vision and produce this much. And it's because they all have superpowers. And I think when you interview and you talk to people, if you can figure out what that is and let people do what they do best, it seems to work. So that's number one. The second thing is the Colorado innovative spirit is really, really cool. And it's something that I found tapping into the network of people that want to help and assist is mind-blowing. All of my connections, I can tie back to a number of people, and all of my assistants, anytime something comes up, I reach out to the same network. I'm like, hey, here's what I need. Who's got it? Cool. Talk to this person. And that seems to work. So those are some of the, I guess, secret sauces around that. That being said, the reason we're moving so fast and doing this is because it's a moment in time. If you haven't read or heard Barack Obama's latest book, please go get it, listen to it. It's absolutely amazing. But he makes a point in there that he realizes that, yes, he's special, but there was a moment in history that he had a chance to step up, and he knew he had to do it then and do it full force so that he could accomplish what he felt he was called to. I feel like that's where I'm at. I feel like I'm in a position because of 2020 and then all the stuff that was set up in workforce development years ago in Colorado. Like, this state is set up in a way that's perfect for this kind of work. And so I have an opportunity to do this now. In 2 years, it may not be as easy. So we've got to make an impact immediately to reach more people.
Evan, Evan, unmuted. Anything? No?
Oh, I just sent my info to Aaron, so I'll connect with you.
Beautiful.
Perfect. I put mine in there as well. And I'm going to add these links so that everyone has those. All the stuff that I said, you can find them on those links. Dive into that information. It's really, really, really powerful.
Well,
Thanks. This was great. I suggest just one quick thing. Douglas Wood is the VP and Executive Director for the Criminal Justice Reform Initiative at the Aspen Institute. He's great. He's very, very good. He's on top of it. And I think that the two of you would connect.
Okay, I'll reach out to you for that connection.
Fantastic.
Thanks. I got to jump off. Thank you, Andrea.
Yep,
That was awesome.
Thank you, Evan, for
Thank-
being here. And thank you, Aaron. I think you've insightfully blew our minds with this conversation and some of the statistics, and your audience was very engaged. And thank you, Susan, Dave, Nicole, of course, your team, Rebecca and Megan, for being here, and Evan. I think there's some great connections even up here in the Roaring Fork Valley that were just made by your contribution to this conversation, and again, opening our eyes to really understanding this, or having a better way to how to approach it, or, you know, maybe pop some of those belief bubbles that exist out there, right? Just based on ignorance that exists. We just don't know. Like I shared when I was researching in my master's program, I was like, oh my God, right? It's just like, holy cow. And I keep saying the older I get, the less I know. And I really lean on a lot of people around me. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of that same thing, which at the end of the day creates, you know, just to tie it into this resiliency experience, that my vision for these talks is it makes a more resilient world. You know, you're talking about more resiliency when it comes to diversity and equity and inclusion in our criminal justice system, and really trying to solve some of these problems. So Aaron, kudos for growing up wanting to help people and where you've gotten today. It's really inspiring. So I'll pass on, of course, your information. I appreciate you throwing all the links in. We'll make sure everybody gets those. If you can copy paste them out of the chat, I'll do a quick follow-up email as well for everybody who attended today. Aaron, any last comments?
No, just thank you all. I really appreciate the engagement. You know, please reach out to me anytime. I'd love to jump in and chat with anyone. So I've saved the ones that you all sent to me. So I just thank you for your time.
Yep, perfect. And next week we have Nancy Fredericks talking with us. She's our facilitator for one of our other programs, RFL Mastermind, and she's just going to talk about practical resiliency you can employ today, maybe some more tactical, easy, quick hits on resiliency. And again, Aaron, thank you. Appreciate our partnership with CoVenture for the support of Roaring Fork leadership, as well as Aaron and Equity Solutions for what you contributed today. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, Aaron.